Hi, everybody. Welcome to the latest episode of Real Talk with Rick. I'm really excited to have in our current longest-serving city employee and maybe one of the longest-serving city of Eden Prairie employees we've ever had. Her name is Pauline Sager. She works in investigations in the police department, and you're going to hear a lot about kind of that area of investigations that she does, really around financial crime. But Pauline started here in Eden Prairie in 1979. She came to us from the Wilmer area. So you're going to hear what brought her here in 1979 and hear about a little bit about her career. She's got some good anecdotes to share about some of the work that she's done all the way up until the end of the podcast. So make sure you listen to the end because she's got one more story and then another story and then another story that she talks about that reflects on her time here. So I'm really pleased to have this conversation with Pauline Sager of our Eden Prairie Police Department. Pauline Sager, thank you for coming in and talking to me today.
You're welcome.
Thank you. So, Pauline, what's your official title?
Investigative aide, and then CFCI, which is Certified Financial Crimes Investigator for addition.
Nice. We'll talk about that too. We're going to get into that. You have been with the city for how long?
43 years.
Wow.
Yep.
Wow. So when you started here, do you know what I was doing? What's your guess?
Probably in high school.
Not yet.
Grade
Thank
school?
you, though. Yeah. Yes. I'm taking that as a compliment. So I was 10.
Okay.
Maybe 9 or 10. So I don't know. Does that put me in like third grade or something?
Probably.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good. No, I appreciate that. But yes, Pauline, you are one of the longest serving, well, you're currently longest serving employee city of Eden Prairie that we have now, but one of the longest ever. So we've got a lot to unpack.
Yep.
Because we're going to cover like 42 plus years, but we're going to go all the way back to asking you first kind of where'd you grow up? Where are you from and where did you grow up?
Well, I have to tell you, that was God's country. I grew up in southwestern Minnesota, and I went to school at Clarkfield.
Yeah, I know where
K
Clarkfield
through 12.
is. Okay,
Yep. And I was a farm kid. And back then, sometimes they'd refer to us as, those dumb farm kids,
Okay,
that was us.
I just heard farm kid. I don't know about dumb farm kid.
Yes, yeah. But that's okay. I don't mind that title.
Absolutely. So then, Clarkfield grew up, high school. Then what did you do and what were you involved in?
Right. Well, in high school, basic organizations like, the Glee Club, and also was a twirler, majorette on the marching band.
Okay.
Yeah, had that kind of fun.
Yeah.
Yep. And then started working for pay. I started working for pay when I was probably in 10th grade. I started working as a waitress at the Highway Cafe in Montevideo.
Okay.
And then I went from there, wanted to be a lifeguard because my mom was a lifeguard. So I thought, okay, I'm going to do that. So my girlfriend and I, we got our WSI at Southwest State University in Marshall, Minnesota.
Yeah.
So we got our WSI. So both of us worked two summers at the Clarkfield swimming pool. And then my senior year, I worked at the nursing home as a nurse's aide.
Yeah.
So got that fun in too.
Yeah.
So I thought that would be payback. So when I get to be that old, I'd have somebody taking care of me too when I need it.
Oh, sure.
And then in high school, I kind of decided, what do you want to be? What do you want to do in your future and so forth. So my three top things were, one was be a flight attendant, police officer, or an interior designer. Now,
all very different things, but
right.
All fascinating.
Yes. So I ended up picking law enforcement. Be a police officer is what my intent was. And so I ended up actually marrying a flight attendant. So I got that clicked off.
Okay.
And then
all
I
right.
do clean or change my house around every once in a
You get
while.
to be
So
your
I do
own
that
interior
interior.
designer.
Yeah. So
That's
I do
awesome.
it all.
Yeah.
I got it a little bit
Yeah.
all. But so then I decided I was going to go to Wilmer Community College for schooling. And I got hired actually as a lifeguard at one of the municipal pools there, their indoor pools, because back where I Clarkfield, we did not have indoor pools. It was all outdoor.
Sure.
So anyway, so I got a job. I started working there, and then I was going to school, and I was enjoying it and starting to learn a little bit about law enforcement. And I thought, I need to get a closer look at it, you know? So I thought, I'm going to go down to the police department and maybe I can get a job working as a janitor or something at the Wilmer PD. So I mosey on down, just walk in, no appointment back then, you know, It was like just showed up. And I said, yeah, I was just wondering if the chief would be in because I would like to talk to him to see if he has any openings, if he needs a janitor or anything like that. And the secretary, she looks at me, she said, did you have an appointment? And I said, no, I didn't. I just was in the neighborhood and I just thought I'd stop in. She's like, well, you know, we're going to probably have to schedule an appointment for you. And then all of a sudden he walked in.
Yeah.
And so I introduced myself and got talking to him. And he goes, well, Pauline, he goes, I would hate to get rid of our janitor. He's got 2 kids and he does an outstanding job, you know.
Yeah.
So like, but he said, if you can get on a work study program, I'll put you to work in our records unit. I said, okay. So I went back to school, looked into that, and I was able to get on one. So I started working in the records unit at the Wilmer PD. And so I worked there during the school year then for 2 years.
Okay.
And then in the summer, the first summer, I actually worked as a cross guard. They had a crossing. Foot Lake was the name of the lake, and that's where everybody went to Foot Lake to swim and stuff. And so I thought, okay, well, I worked there and did that for that first summer. And then the next summer, I actually had thought about coming to the Metro to do an internship just to see what it would be like in the cities, you know, something different, small town. I mean, I thought I was in the big time at Wilmer, but I knew there was something bigger. So I thought maybe I will. But believe it or not, the counselor that I had, he told me, you know, Pauline, he goes, that competition is so stiff in the cities right now, I don't know if I would recommend it. So I went back and met with the chief, Lyle Getterts at Wilmer, and I said, Chief, would it be okay if I continued, if I could do an internship here this summer? And he's like, oh, for sure. So I did my internship, and then my intent was really actually to continue to work at Wilmer. And he recommended, he said, Pauline, you're a female. He said, and women are just getting started in this line of work. I really recommend you go get your 4-year degree. And then you come back and see me. I thought, okay, I will do that. So I transferred down to Mankato State and attending classes there. And one of them was talking about the fact that when you do go out to do your interviewing, you don't want to wait and go to, just wait to go to the place that you really want to work. You need to go and get experience in interviewing because it's not as easy as it sounds. So I thought, okay, well, I look in their paper one day, and here's this ad for a CSO, Community Service Officer at the Eden Prairie Police Department. And I already met all the requirements that they had, so I thought...
What year is this, roughly?
1979.
79,
Yep.
got it.
So the ad came out in the paper on March 25th. And so I thought, okay, I'm going to apply for that. So I put my application in, and I had no expectations because of what the counselor had told me over at Wilmer. Competition was stiff. And then also at Mankato, he was talking about how stiff the competition was. And I thought, well, I'm just going to throw it in and see. So I put my application in, and I got a letter, a call for an appointment, came in for an appointment. And on the panel, it was Sergeant Bob Tyson, and, well, then he retired as a lieutenant, Les Bridger, and Donna Hyatt, who was the records supervisor at the time. So it was 3 on the panel. And I will never forget this, because it was fun. I mean, and you know how you pick up when you're talking to people, if they have humor or sense of humor about them, that just kind of, you just catch it.
Yes.
And Bob Tyson asked me, he said, I see, Pauline, here that you're a WSI lifeguard. How would you teach somebody like me to swim? I said, somebody like you? I said, somebody like you I'd probably take out into a boat. We'd oar out, middle of the lake. I said, I'd point you towards shore. And then right before I push you in, I'd let you know that you just want to keep moving towards shore. And if you sink to the bottom, just start walking and you'll be fine. And he just just cracked up.
Yeah.
It was interesting,
Yeah.
And I was sitting there going, should I have really said that, Pauline?
Yeah. Well, I mean, you were being yourself. right?
Yes,
Yeah,
right. Very much so.
absolutely. Yeah.
Yep, very much so. So anyway, to say the least, then I told him, I said, actually, the reality is, I said, I'd have you blow bubbles like everybody else.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah.
But it sounded better doing it that way.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, so the end of the interview, I thought it went well, but I didn't know for sure. Then I got a phone call from Donna Hyatt, and she told me, she said, Pauline, we would like you to disregard the letter we sent you. And I said, well, then that's either a positive or a negative, because I haven't gotten the letter yet.
Yeah.
And she said, oh, you're right. We sent it to your parents, not to school. And she said, well, then this is a positive, because she said we were going to bring the next 6 back in for an interview, for a second interview, and 2 of them had been hired elsewhere. And you are next on the list. So we would like to have you come in, if you would like, for a second interview. And I said, sure, I'd love to. And I was just ecstatic. At that point, the reality was I was still going to school, so I was okay with finishing my degree. And then it was like, but I got that far. I thought, I'm doing okay. So when I do go put my application into Wilmer, I'll probably do pretty good.
Yeah, yeah.
So anyway, went in for the second interview, and shortly after I got the phone call that they were offering me the job if I would like to come.
Yeah.
And I said, okay. I said, I had to think about it though.
Yeah.
And I got hold of Chief Lyle Gedderts at Wilmer, because my intent was to go back there. And I know his intent was for me to come too. And I got a hold of him, and I told him what I'd been offered, and he goes, Pauline, take it. You're going to the cream of the crop. And he said, but if you don't like living in the cities, come back and see me. Mm-hmm. So
it's kind of funny, because they thought you were going to go practice interview in other locations, and your first interview is here, and you get the job.
Yes.
Interestingly, though, I'm almost positive of this. This is just, I didn't know this ahead of time, but I still would guarantee that, yes, Eden Prairie is in the metro area, but I'm almost positive Wilmer was a bigger city than here at the time, though.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
But you knew this city was growing.
Right.
But either way.
Right.
Yeah.
And, being rural, you kind of lump. It was down in the cities and part of the metro.
Sure.
So you kind of lump it together, being small town.
No, I remember. No, my first job was in Renville County, Minnesota, and anything that wasn't, you were either in greater Minnesota or you were in the cities. That's what they would say, I'm going to the cities. So that was new for me. I came from Wisconsin, so I had to learn that.
Oh, okay.
We're driving into the cities. Where are we driving into? Are we going to Plymouth? Are we going to St. Paul?
Right.
Are we going to Minneapolis? Are we going to Bloomington? Doesn't matter. It's the cities.
Right.
So tell me about that job then, 42 years ago. What were you doing, and then how did that evolve?
Well, I can tell you this. My very first day, I washed Officer Lance Brace's squad car. That was my first assignment, and I give him a hard time about that every time I see him.
Yeah.
I said, you need your car washed? I thought, I can handle that.
Yeah.
But and my first supervisor was Mike Bozacker. He was the supervisor, CSO supervisor at the time.
Yeah.
And because we wore so many different hats back then as CSOs, and we did a lot more than what today.
But it's just a lot of just internal assistance in the department in addition to helping on calls.
Right. Yep. And back then it was, if an officer was tied up on another call, you took the next call. If there was an accident and they were already on something else, you took the accident.
Sure.
And back then we wrote them up. PI or PD didn't matter.
Sure.
We took them. And then I always assumed at first that, somebody would show up, then they'd write the report. And they were like, nope, first on scene writes it. You write it. So I got to do a lot of different things.
Sure.
And then reports. And this is something I even bring up today, too, when we talk about just the community. Back then, we always took reports in person. Every report was taken in person, or somebody stopped at the office, or we stopped at their residence or their business and took the report. And as time has gone on, we've been too busy to do that a lot. So officers have to take reports over the phone. It's just the way it is. But when I look today at the community policing and getting closer to our community and that again, that's been one of the suggestions that I've had, is if we can get back to more in person.
Everything in person.
Yep,
yeah.
It's better.
Sure.
And because you get to know people.
I agree. It is interesting that some people maybe want to not be in person. It's really, they may prefer to do something quickly over the phone.
Yes.
But you're right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I get that, too. And that's like one of the detectives who we were talking about it. And he said the same thing, too. He said, the younger generation today is used to being on their phone, which more than what we were back in the day. Yeah. Back when I first started, we didn't even have them. So, and I get that, too. But still, I think that's the way people get to know you better.
Sure.
I mean, to get recognized, know who you are, and they know your face, they recognize you.
Yeah, absolutely. So I know that there must have been some point where you are a community service officer. Maybe you were thinking about or moving toward what would be a police officer, but it didn't head that way. It headed into this investigative area.
Yes. I mean, my plan was to become a sworn officer. And then I had only been there, started in May of 79. And then November of 80, investigations was really getting behind. And they thought, hey, maybe the CSOs could work some of our check cases. And so they came up with that idea, and they wanted to have us pick up the slack. So that's how I got into investigative,
Sure.
That arena. And that's what kind of changed my thinking on becoming sworn, because I started working on check cases, and I was enjoying it. And of course, we were going to share that with the other CSOs that were working. And they said, Pauline, I don't want to do those check cases. I said, well, if I'm doing all the check cases and you guys are picking up the slack on everything else. So it was a trade-off. So then they did everything else, and then I focused mainly in on the checks. And I started working, when I say check cases, I mean like NSF. In other words, it was the true account holder that wrote the check but didn't have money in the account to cover it.
Sure.
And then...
Yeah, we're not talking any kind of you're just talking about insufficient funds.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yep, NSF.
Yeah.
Yep.
Non-sufficient funds. Yeah.
And then account closed. So in other words, the bank closed the account because of the problems they were having, and they were still out writing checks. That was the main cases
Sure.
that I was working.
Yeah.
Occasionally you get a check forgery. Not very often, but once in a while. And then once in a very blue moon, you would get a credit card fraud. I mean, very rare, but once in a while. Mm-hmm. And that's how it went for quite a while. Long time, a few years were like that. And then slowly, then it started changing.
Yeah.
To where we got more of the credit card fraud and then the identity theft and the counterfeiting of checks and mail theft. That was big. That's been big for years.
Now. Yeah. I'm old enough to remember many different establishments that you would walk in and they would have a copy of the checks from the people that had written the bad checks to say to them and to all the people that worked in the convenience store, wherever you were, do not take these checks from these people.
Right.
Kind of like the dude from The Big Lebowski. He would write. I think he wrote a check for a glass of milk or something. But either way, I remember that. But it changed. You're right.
Yep.
You stayed in that area though, and kept pursuing that. So talk more about lead that into today. Even maybe talk, Pauline, about what's a typical day now in this arena for you?
Well, typical day is from today compared to the past. In the past, my day would come in. I would check my in-bin for any mail I've received or any handwritten phone messages that I needed to return calls on. Now today, I check my email and I check my voicemail. Just even that change has occurred. You know what I mean? Where before it all used to be written and in paper, and now it's electronic. So basically that's what I do is I just check. Of course, we do have to check our mail bin too yet, though, because occasionally we'll get stuff in the mail.
Once in a while.
Not very often. Mm-hmm. Anyway, so it's basically to check that, reach back out to people, and the cases that I'm assigned, you're touching base with them. My priority has always been if I get a case, I reach out the same day I get it. So they've got the name to come back to.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Sure.
So they know who's working it, and if they have a question, they'll know who to reach out to. And then it's just whatever angle on every case you need to work.
So maybe share a couple of interesting or memorable cases.
Well, I guess the biggest case that I really worked was a mortgage fraud. And mortgage fraud cases weren't that prevalent at the time either, per se. So it took a little bit of learning curve to really comb through it all and to find out exactly what I needed. But again, it's pretty basic though too. I mean, it's an identity theft. And so it's just getting all the documentation. So it's doing search warrants, and it's either search warrants that are at the residence, at a business, or a resident. Or then you're doing the search warrants at banks, any financial institutions, places like that. So that's what it kind of takes, and then it's combing through it all and pinpointing it all, and it takes time. Because when you do those, people don't have the information for you right away. It can take a while. You might have to wait a month or two sometimes to get information back.
Sure.
So that's the frustrating part for victims too.
Yeah. That it just can't be
It's
taken.
not instantaneous.
Sure, understood. Well, what would be probably the most exhilarating part of your job? What?
I would say that is actually signing a complaint that the county attorney or the city attorney have now brought formal charges,
Yeah.
and they've signed off on it, and then I sign it, and then it goes to a judge.
Sure.
And when you get it back from the judge and they've signed it, somebody's going to be formally charged.
Do you think, like, with kind of how quickly stuff is moving today and technology and everything, that like sometimes people are to a point where they might not even expect that someone may be found or someone you solve the case? I mean, is there, because it seems that there's so much fraud and so much, you know what I mean, that it seems so hard.
Yes.
But you do solve a lot of cases.
Yes, we do, but a lot we don't, and
Yeah.
those are the ones I really feel bad about.
Yeah.
Because people are out a lot of money.
Yeah.
And that's what's shocking too, is that over the years, when you talk about kind of what makes you feel good about your job, is sometimes it's the victims with a $50 loss, to a $1,000 loss, which in the big scheme of things, where people are losing $5,000 to $25,000, $30,000 on a lot of these deals, it's those cases that affect people the worst, the smaller ones. So
Yeah.
even though these large cases where we're talking millions, like with the mortgage fraud, that was $1 million case.
Sure.
And that's rewarding, but yet sometimes it's rewarding to get these little cases too,
Yeah.
because those are actually harder for a lot of the victims because they don't make the kind of money either. So that $250 is a big loss.
Yeah.
So that's
Is it as simple as just someone has stolen mail and gotten people's credit cards and charged on them?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah,
And I've
like-
had several of that over the years too. There was one case. Gentleman was from Minneapolis, and he had stolen mail and forged some checks, or passed some stolen checks. He didn't counterfeit. He was just passing what he had stolen.
Yeah.
And he got arrested. I was going to go downtown to interview him, but he supposedly didn't feel good, was having a heart attack or something. So he got taken over to HCMC. So I went over there to meet with him when the doctor said it was okay to talk to him. So I went over and met with him. And it's interesting when you talk to people. He told me, he said, Pauline, he said, today, people are different today. And now this would have been probably 20 years ago
Okay.
when this case came through. He told me, I have scruples. I mean, I know you may not think I have scruples, but I do have scruples. I do not steal from family members, and I do not steal from friends. But he said, you know what? They do today. And I said, yes, you're right. And you're right. You still stole.
Yeah, and you're going to
but-
be charged,
and
you're going to
gonna
suffer
be
the
charged.
consequences. But
Right.
your version of ethics is strangers that you steal
Correct.
from, not family.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And bless his heart. I mean, that was his way of getting by, I think, mentally too, and emotionally
Mentally.
being able to handle what he was doing. He
Yeah.
had some ethics.
But I would think that makes me think of the heartbreaking cases of taking advantage of vulnerable adults, of people that are guardians or
Yes.
relatives. Now that you say that,
Yes.
that is awful.
Yes, it is. It's hard.
Yeah.
And those are the worst cases, hardest cases to work, because the victims, are perplexed that they have a family member that would do that. Sometimes they're not shocked because the family member's been suffering with whatever issue they
Yeah,
have.
sure.
And in working these types of crimes with financials, most of my suspects, they either have an addiction to drugs or alcohol, gambling,
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
and those are the
Yeah,
motivators.
yeah,
Those
absolutely.
are the key motivators right there that make them want to go out and do what
steal.
they do.
And steal
Yep.
like that.
Yep. And so with some family members, they get it, but yet it's disheartening when it happens.
Yeah. I was saying kind of what's, exhilarating for you, and you talked about when you're able to sign that complaint. I think we're talking about what's most challenging. Is there anything else you want to say about what can be challenging about your job, or any other?
Well, and sometimes too, it's just technology today. It's advancing, and Bitcoin cases they're so hard to track. And I worked a case at the beginning of the year that involved a big loss, and was trying to work and track it back as far as I could. And I tracked to a suspect to Las Vegas and got a hold of a detective out there who actually works on the joint task force out there with the Secret Service. And so he helped me a little bit, and he taught me a lot. And he also told me, though, Pauline, he goes, you need to know that, he goes, I work this every day. And if I go on vacation for 2 weeks, when I come back, I have to relearn a lot of it.
Within not years, weeks. So you think about how checks slowly evolve to credit card and online banking.
Right.
Cryptocurrency changes by the week.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes. And so that's what's frustrating because, and that's why the criminals use it, because they know they can, I mean, it's a hard tracking thing for us.
Yeah.
And it's frustrating, and it makes me, you get kind of sad about it, but what can you do?
Right.
I mean,
but it's always like things keep evolving and
right.
Gotta be,
and keep changing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's the world, though. Everything does.
Yeah.
So
what, like, if you could think about, your career and maybe you can't think of the proudest moment, but it would be great if you had a kind of a story for me before I ask you some more questions about, what you like to do in your spare time. But back to the current role you're in the city. I know you're going to be, retiring here early next year.
Yep.
But what would you, what do you think is your proudest moment?
Well, I would say it was really that mortgage case that involved the victims. And the thank yous that I got from the victims were priceless.
And were there, I mean, it was like multiple people that had been deceived by one individual as it related to...
Some met through church. And
okay.
Some were selling their property or looking for property, because the gal was in real estate.
Okay.
And so that's how they got access to her, or she to them.
She to them. Sure, so group of people.
And one of the victims, or I should say, it took her a while, but she finally found a home outstate, out in the country, and her son, and it took a while, but just how much appreciation for holding her accountable, it's rewarding.
Yeah, absolutely. So for you, Pauline, and you're going to have a lot of extra time starting next year, but for now, recently, what do you like to do outside of work in your spare time?
Well, actually, I have to say this. Number one, the 76ers, because if I don't bring them up, I will be on the bottom of the list. They're my girlfriends from high school. We get together. Some of them I see more than once a year.
Okay.
Some of them I can see a couple times a month or more.
Okay.
But we're high school buddies, and we get together all the time.
The class of 76?
Yeah.
The 76ers.
And we call ourselves 76ers.
The 76ers from Clarkfield High School.
Correct.
How many of you are there?
There's 5 of us that get together all the time.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And they're fun. And here's the kicker. We just hired our new front desk person, part-time gal.
Yes.
She just started today.
Paula, right?
Paula,
Yeah.
yes. And I thought, you know what? Your name sounds so familiar to me. I've heard it before. Didn't really, we couldn't think of how I would have known her name. Well, we got talking. I said, well, where did you work before? And she said, American Family Insurance. And I said, oh, my goodness. And I said, you wouldn't have to have known Kathy, would you? And she's like, oh, we're good friends at work. And I'm like, I've known her since kindergarten.
She's a 76er.
She's a 76er.
76er.
Yeah.
So,
small world.
Curious when I think about this. So, 5 friends from high school, Clarkfield. Are any of them still there? Are they spread throughout the country? Where is everybody, really quickly?
Yeah. One is still in Clarkfield.
Okay.
One is up in Shoreview.
Okay.
One's out in Wilmer.
Okay.
And one is up in Pine City.
Got it.
And but then I have to say, too, there's a bunch of other classmates that I get together with and go camping with them. And, I mean,
That's awesome.
we're a tight little class.
That's awesome.
Yep.
So, yeah, obviously a lot of high school friends back there. Is there any family still in Clarkfield that you go back for?
Actually, yes. I've got relatives in Dawson, Minnesota, too.
I know. Yep.
Yep. My mom was an RN at the hospital there for 35 years.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, it's funny when you talk about working at the pool, working at the nursing home. A lot of the nursing homes are, in many cases, are public. They're like county run,
right.
City run sometimes. So
yes,
that's interesting.
Yep. And then I have to mention the Craft Night girls.
Yeah, mention the Craft Night girls.
Yep,
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, they're important too.
What crafts?
Well, I have to tell you, we actually did start out doing different. Whatever you like to do, you could do, and we would get together.
Like separate. Everybody's doing their own thing.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. I'm a crocheter.
Sure.
So I would crochet, and we started getting together fall of the year, and we went through spring. And then we didn't get together in the summer, but we met every Wednesday night. And it started out with just coffee and dessert. And then pretty soon, little kids started coming. And so, of course, the little kids came along then, too. And then we moved to every other week. And then we moved to once a month because we had the kids and everything.
Yeah.
And then, so we ended up making snacks. And we kind of quit doing crafts. We just sat and talked,
yeah.
visit and laugh and play cards,
Sure.
whatever. And then one of my girlfriend's daughters, she was like, I don't know why you call it craft night. You should call it snack night because we just have
That's what it
snacks.
became.
Right.
Yeah.
And now we're back to, now we meet, now we're doing twice a month again. We get together and we take turns, hop from house to house. And now we make supper.
That's good.
Yeah.
It's funny in our life cycle when you go from a lot of free time and then you have children, and I have 3, and then it's a little tougher and the kids have to come along and it's less frequent, and then you become an empty nester and you have more time.
Yes.
And you circle back and you meet more often. That's pretty neat.
Yes.
That's good.
And that's life.
Yeah.
And that's where too. That's like
That's
even
neat. Then maybe their children and grandchildren, and that's pretty neat. And then maybe the crafts start back up again.
Well, that's what I'm thinking.
Have you crocheted the whole time anyway?
No,
you stopped?
No, because you don't have time. You're running to everything else.
Understood.
That's like I chuckle. It's like you put in a full day at work, and then like when the kids, like you say, are little and they're in sports and activities. My son was in Boy Scouts, so we were running to scout meetings and then doing all the volunteer stuff that goes with Boy Scouts, and then basketball and baseball.
Yeah.
So, and my husband was the flight attendant, so he was gone half the month.
Oh,
so
sure.
I was just me at home, and that's like I was laughing even today. Now he's back over visiting some friends in Japan right now, and of course it's snowing. And of course, who's got to go out and shovel? And
You do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I chuckle.
Do you get free flight tickets wherever you want to, though?
We go standby.
Standby, okay.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah.
But right now, because he took a buyout with Delta Airlines back when COVID had hit.
Okay.
And they offered it to their senior flight attendants, and so he did take it, but regretted it. He's one of these that he likes to keep busy.
Okay.
Yeah. He hasn't talked to 300 people in a day. It's just not quite right.
Well, that's a good job then. He had the right job for that.
Yes. Yep. So anyway, So
interesting. So what would you say, amongst whether it's the 76ers, the Craft Night group, the family, what would you say amongst friends and peers? Like, what's something that you're known for? What's something that people would say that Pauline's known for?
Probably a character.
You being a character.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Keeping people on the edge of their seat.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
So this is interesting with the flight attendant piece. Maybe you've done this because you've been able to travel. If you could go anywhere for a full week, where's the first place you would go?
Well, I tell you, I have been quite a few different places, but actually I went. I would go back to Norway, to where my grandmother was born. Okay. Because believe it or not, the house that she lived in was still standing when I was there back in, it was 1998 or 9 I had gone. My mom and my younger sister, because my mom had taken our older sister for a graduation present from high school to Norway. And so, that's the one thing with the way I was brought up. If you do something for one, you do it for the other. So, of course, myself and my younger sister, we were told that, Mom would be taking us to Norway on a trip. Well, I graduated in 1976, and my sister was, 1983 maybe? She's 7 years younger than me. And we went to Norway in 1998.
Okay, well, you made it.
We made it. She did do it.
Yeah.
But we chuckle about that when we would tease her, because, that was one thing with my parents. It's like we were all treated the same.
Right.
And that's the other thing, too, with being brought up on a farm. It was like you learned how to work.
Yeah. Absolutely. No doubt about it.
And that's why I chuckle, too, of, I can remember when I got hired here, my dad was like, well, you go to work for somebody, you got to do what they tell you to do. And when they tell you to jump, you find out how high. You got to earn your paycheck. Earn your paycheck. That was a big thing.
Yeah, that's true. Well, you said earlier it's like my first paying job. And
Right.
I thought I got a kick out of that because I think you were working probably when you were very young, probably on the farm. It wasn't a paying job. You said my first paying job. So
right.
that tipped off to me how much you've worked.
Yep. But it's priceless because it does add an ethic too.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, and that's like somebody did ask me, well, how many years you been working? And I said, well, here 43, but I suppose I started when I was 5 or 7.
Yeah.
And that was starting out with just pulling weeds out of the beans and picking up rock to dry, then to hauling loads and driving, and then it was baling and everything else. So yeah, we've had our fun.
Yeah. Well, in terms of the whole travel piece, because you go back to Norway, what are 1 or 2 other places you remember that are memorable that you traveled to?
Thailand.
Okay.
Beautiful country.
Okay.
And interesting. My husband, they wanted to hire him as a pilot back then because they had just opened up flight services. I mean, because it was all, I think, ran by the government to start with. And they were going to be starting, I think, private flying. And so they were interested in my husband because they'd met him on an airplane. Imagine that. He talks a mile a minute. So, yeah. And he did have his commercial ratings and everything, too. So we went over that. It was shortly after we were married. And it was just a beautiful country. People were, and that's why my husband went to the Asian countries a lot. Mm-hmm. Japan, Philippines, Singapore, Saipan, all that.
Yeah,
those were his favorite places.
I have not been to Asia, but many people I know have talked about Vietnam and Thailand and visiting some of those countries in Asia. Absolutely.
Oh, they're beautiful. The countryside's beautiful. Mm-hmm. The people are friendly. That's what the draw was. But anyway, with the Thailand, we stayed at a hotel, and 1 week after we had been there, it had been bombed. So we missed the bombing. It was right in the front. It didn't take out the whole hotel, but there had been a bombing at the hotel. And it was like, so you get, there are always times in life, and it's like you walk away and you're like, okay, wasn't my time.
Wow. But scary. Mm-hmm. So you, Pauline, are on a desert island and you can only bring 3 things. And I know I try not to say, I'll bring my husband or I'll bring, that's fine if people do that. But what, because I say what 3 items would you bring with you, not what 3 people. But.
Okay. Swimming suit.
Yeah.
Water.
Yeah.
And sunscreen.
Okay, so it's kind of a survival mode thing. Yeah, that's good.
Yep.
It's just got to make it through, got to hold on till someone gets there. Yep. Fair enough. So what plans do you have after retirement?
Well, doing more with the 76ers, getting to see them, because a couple of them are already retired, and then a couple of us are retiring pretty close at the same time. And she goes, what are we going to do, Pauline? We've been working our whole life. I said, you know what we do? I said, when you get bored, call me up. Pauline, let's meet for lunch. I said, and then tell me where. You want to go to Glencoe? Do you want to go to Hutchinson? You want to go to St. Cloud? Where you want to go? We can go anywhere.
Go anywhere at any time.
Yeah, anytime. Yep. So I think that's the biggest thing.
That's nice. That's neat. That's good. Well, Pauline, I really appreciate you coming on. I'll give you the last word here. If there's kind of anything that you were thinking about, knowing that you were coming on the podcast, that I want to be able to give you a chance to kind of share any final story, anecdote, words of wisdom. You kind of get the last word here.
All I can say is it's been a treat working for the city. And when you had asked earlier too about, like when I made the decision not to become sworn.
Yeah.
Part of that too, I wanted to mention was Dan Mabley. He was a Hennepin County attorney, and he ended up becoming a judge for quite a few years. Yeah, but back when he was the county attorney, he specialized in the white-collar credit card fraud and that kind of thing. And when I would send in complaints in the beginning, I would always put them in either Al Larson's name or Les Bridger's name. Mm-hmm. And he was like, I got to ask you, Pauline, why do you do that? He goes, you don't have to be sworn to sign that complaint. You just have to be testifying to that what's in there is true and correct. Oh, I said, well then, okay. So
it's me.
Yeah.
Put my name down.
All right, then I'll put my name down.
Yeah.
Then,
Yeah.
But because he had asked about that, and I kind of, okay. And then as time went on, he's like, he goes, Pauline, you can draft your own warrants. You just can't execute them. So you can be the affiant, but you can't execute.
Sure.
I thought, well, okay then. So as time went on, it was like I could do so much.
And you could do it yourself under your name, not on behalf of somebody.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yes. Yeah. And so it was like, I'm having fun doing this.
Yeah.
So it was like, I enjoyed this. So that's what was kind of a part of it all, too. It was working with him and him opening my eyes to the fact that there was more that I could do that I wasn't doing. And I thought, oh, okay, I'm going to do what I'm doing.
Yeah.
So I enjoyed it. It was fun. And that's like I say, it's been a fun career. But yet, I do have to tell you, this is another story. In the very beginning, I get a phone call, or not a phone call, a radio call. It's like motorist assist on 494 heading northbound, and I think it was up by Shady Oak Road. Okay, so going up the hill, and there were 3 men standing outside of a car. So I pull over and walk up, and they just looked at me, and they were just, oh, how come they sent you? And I'm like, well, I'm the only one available right now. And I said, what can I do for you? Well, we have a flat tire, and we need help changing it. And I said, then you better realize that today is your lucky day. And they're looking at me like, well, what do you mean? We got you, female.
Yeah.
And I said, I don't even know if the other guy working today could change your tire. I said, I'm a farm girl.
Yeah.
I said, I grew up before I could even drive my car out the driveway. I had to be able to change the oil and change a tire. So I said, you got your jack in the back and a spare? Let's go.
Yeah.
And they were just like, they just couldn't believe it. And they were just beside themselves. Well, it was I told them, I said, your lucky day today.
Yeah. Well, hopefully from that point forward, and I'm assuming, like you said, this is when you were CSO in the early 80s.
Yes.
That they learned their lesson.
Yes. Oh, they did.
In terms of assumptions.
Yes.
Yeah.
And a box of chocolate, too, I think, came from those men, too.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, maybe they did that.
Yes. But I chuckled, though. But that's where times have changed.
Yes.
But then I have to admit, too, though, for me, growing up with a mom who was an RN, she worked. And so when women's lib became like a big thing, it wasn't a big thing. I thought, what's a big deal about this? Mom's been working for how many years?
Sure.
It just didn't sink in.
Absolutely.
To me, because it was already, and parents brought us up to work, have a work ethic. You want a roof over your head and food on the table, you better go to work. And when they ask you to jump, find out how high.
Yeah.
So it's been a great career.
Well,
and helping people is awesome.
Great.
Too.
Well, I mean, I thank you for Wilmer, to some extent, thank them for telling you to get some interview practice, which you did in Eden Prairie, which brought you here in late 1979, and then you've stayed here for 40 plus years, and it's so much appreciated. Everything you do for us, everything you do in the police department, Pauline, is so much appreciated. So thank you.
No, been a treat.
Yes. Well, thanks for talking to us and sharing a little bit about your career and insight, and best of luck. Yeah. You want one more thing?
Yeah, I got to tell you one more thing.
Sure.
I just thought about this.
One more thing.
This is
We're gonna title this podcast one more thing.
I got all kinds of one more things, but this one here is pretty entertaining because this is dealing with suspects. I mentioned that one gentleman in his explanation. I had another gal who had stolen a wallet from a business where people worked, and she had used the credit card here in Eden Prairie. Found out who she was, asked her to come in and meet with me, and she came in and denied all of it. I had beautiful photos, though, and I think this was Target at the time that had taken the loss. And I'm looking at the photo, and I'm looking at her, and I asked her, I said, do you by chance have a twin sister? And she said, no, I don't have a twin sister. I said, do you have a relative that looks like you? She was like, no. And I said, this is you. And she goes, nope, that's not me. And I said, well, you're wearing the same clothes that you had on in the picture that you have on today. Nope, not me. That was a first.
Yeah.
But she was so adamant.
Yeah.
And that's where sometimes it's like, bless your heart. But,
that's what you're dealing with. But I think you had pretty good evidence there.
Yes. But that was an entertaining one because that one was unbelievable.
That's memorable.
That's a memorable one. But
that's funny.
Yes. But that's like I say, it's been helping people over the years that, even though, and today too, people getting restitution is so hard, but at least if the person can be held accountable, it makes people feel better.
Yeah, absolutely. That's true.
So that's what's added to my career.
Great.
Yep.
Good. Well, Pauline, thanks again.
Yes, you're welcome. Thank you.